we are back again today with Dr. Ron Rainey of the Southern Risk Management Education Center. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being on our podcast today.
No, happy to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to share some of the resources and programs that we have to help farmers and ranchers.
Absolutely. So what is the Southern Risk Management Center? What's kind of the goals of that organization?
Yeah, so our tagline is that we empower producers to manage risk. So we are a part of the University of Arkansas. That's where the Southern Center is housed. We're part of a national program called Extension Risk Management Education. And so basically we provide technical assistance to farmers and ranchers through education workshops that we fund through grants to help farmers and ranchers understand resources, strategies, or even just what's the situation, what's going on here with the prices, what's going on with the supply chain, why are input prices up so high, and then what are some strategies that we can do in this difficult time to help manage that. And so part of education, we work also where our grants go to primarily other educational institutions, but also to some community-based organizations. So we provide funding through a competitive grants process to any organization that is educating or training farmers or ranchers.
Okay. And you say you're a part of this national network. So how many risk management centers are there across the country?
So including our center, there's four regional centers. There's the Southern Center, the Western Center, which is out in Washington State, North Central, which is in Nebraska, and then the Eastern or Northeastern, which is in Delaware. And so we cover all the states and territories of the U.S., but we collaborate in terms of our what we call a request for funds available whenever we have grant programs. We also collaborate to host an annual national conference where we bring together some of the best projects and programs that have been going on, as well as those experts that are delivering those trainings to a national conference to just kind of have a train-the-trainer, if you will, and to reinvigorate a network to learn from each other.
So, only four in the country. This is a pretty big get for Arkansas to have this organization kind of in our own backyard.
It really is, and we've had it since the ERME program has been around since 2002, but Arkansas has had it since 2009. Okay. So it really is a testament to some of the great work and great people we have here doing some wonderful things for farmers and ranchers. But it's a big program, provides a number of resources to help farmers and ranchers understand what's going on in their challenging business environment.
So, we've had it since 2009, so that's 13 years. Have you been there all 13 years?
All 13 years. So I was co-director for, say, the first 5, and so the last 6 or 7, I've been the sole director of that center.
Right. And what were you doing before you started at the center?
Yeah, so my training, I've been with the University of Arkansas, and I work for a division. So it's the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture, and we say system because the Division of Agriculture is our research arm, which is our experiment station, where we have a lot of research centers around the state and on campus in Fayetteville. Our teaching, which is the Bumpers College of Agriculture, Food, and Life Sciences, which is at Fayetteville, the teaching side, and then Extension. And so Extension is in Little Rock, where most of Extension faculty are. So I've been housed in Little Rock in Extension. I'm an agricultural economist, and so I work in business planning and marketing. And when I say marketing, it is the product marketing, so relationship marketing, branding, product differentiation. So I work in marketing basically across the board and across the scale, from some of our largest producers in the state to some of our smallest, including a number of farmers that sell only at farmers markets. And so I did that for the first 10 years of my academic career since 2000. So that's when I got my PhD. I'd worked previously doing some work with Extension, again basically in farm management, but went back to school and worked part-time, but got a PhD in 2000 and have been working on that track of risk management in general since then.
All right, so you've been at least agriculture adjacent for a while now.
Yeah, my entire career, almost 30 years.
Awesome.
Almost 30 years, yeah.
So, I mean, you've talked about farm management, farm marketing, and now you're the director of the education center. So now it's 2022. So what are farmers facing? You know, I mean, we're doing this podcast all about stress, and so I know these farmers are facing a lot of risks this year. So what do y'all kind of see?
Yeah, no, and one of the things is we try to help those farmers understand and mitigate those risks. And so, you know, we just come through the pandemic, which on the ag supply chain created a number of issues because agriculture was deemed a critical industry so they could keep working. But just getting the word out about that. There's a lot of challenges because not all sectors, you know, adapted well. But even our small farmers were trying to sell their products, say on a roadside stand, and they may have been stopped or had to get the appropriate permissions. Just trying to make sure that everyone, the appropriate people, were aware that our farmers could still produce because everyone needs to eat every day. It's a question I ask people when I go do meetings. Sometimes I'm like, who all's involved in agriculture? And usually the farmers raise their hand. But then I'll say, how many of you ate a meal this morning? And when they raise their hand, I say, well, then you're part of agriculture because you're part directly or indirectly. And that's something that I think the pandemic really brought to light when you walked in and you saw grocery stores with empty shelves. We notice it here in Arkansas whenever there's a snowstorm. But our confidence in that system of production, processing, delivery in a consistent manner, it all starts with that farmer being able to produce and deliver their products. And so the pandemic created some challenges. There was a lot of innovation there. What we saw throughout the pandemic was a lot of farmers enhanced their understanding and use of digital, online marketing, online connecting. Farmers markets went to drive-through farmers markets, things of that nature. More of what we call a community-supported agriculture, or CSA, like you get a magazine subscription. You pay a fee to a farmer, and they deliver you certain boxes of goods, say once a week or once a month. So lots of innovation there. But as we move through the pandemic and we come back and still in the pandemic, but what we're seeing now is, you know, some of the microeconomic effects, high inflation, which causes all costs to go up. But farmers are facing it increasingly because there's a lot of bottlenecks in the supply chain. So you have increased prices, but you also have some trouble even getting some basic supplies. The issue with Ukraine and Russia, a lot of people don't realize that Ukraine is considered the breadbasket of Europe. Ukraine and Russia are major producers of fertilizer and exporters of fertilizer products and those basic ingredients. So there's been some issues in fertilizer that farmers are having issues of increased prices, a lot more variability and volatility in those prices, having to manage through those things, which is new things that you didn't have to think about in the past. You might look at a small percent increase, but now you may even have to wait even on a delivery of fertilizer or the availability to get it, and other input or supply products, including some equipment parts. So we're hearing a lot of those frustrations from farmers, and then so you got inflation, you got supply issues with raising prices, but then lastly, I would just say weather variability. We've seen just an increased incidence of more severe weather events. And even if they're not severe, just different times or rain patterns. And so, a lot of times farmers can they can predict some of those things to a degree, but they plan those out for a season. So when you're at your window where you're trying to prep your field for planting, a big rainstorm just messes that whole planning up. Or if you just planted and a big storm comes in, you may have to go back out and replant. Not to mention whenever those rain events turn into flood events, which is even more drastic. And so those severe events of the rainfall, the rainstorm, thunderstorms, tornado, lightning, all of those things impact farmers, and it's a risk to their production, to the economic viability of their businesses.
Yeah, so let's unpack, because really what you're hitting on these recurring themes.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're going into our third episode, and these are definitely things that we've talked to with our farmers. particularly this supply chain issue, which is something we've dealt with for a couple of years now. I think a lot of people don't realize, if I order a vinyl record or some toilet paper off of Amazon, and they say it's going to be 3 weeks, I can usually figure out how to get around that issue. What does a 3-week delay mean for a farmer here in Arkansas?
I mean, a 3-week delay could be your harvest window. Right. I mean, you could have been planning on, if you got messed up on your packaging to place your products that you're harvesting from the field, that could be the window when you were planning to harvest, and when your products are ready for harvest, they're ready for harvest.
Right.
And so that's the thing that I think a lot of people outside of agriculture don't maybe underappreciate it. Or may not even be aware of it. So when you have those windows or those delays, it really can negate a whole series of successes. So that's the thing with agriculture. You have to have a series of successes. You have to have a successful planning period. And then when the crop is growing, you got to make through that successfully. No, nothing destroys the crop in terms of insect, disease, adverse weather. And then you get there, and then hopefully the price is at a good place, and you can get it harvested into the market. So it's all of those things puts farmers in a unique place in that they are facing competitive markets on the input side. When they're buying their inputs, they can't, unless they're a large farmer, they can't go buy fertilizer and store it for 6 months. And it's just not economical for most of our farmers to do that. But then on the marketing side, they're competitive in that they can't say, okay, I'm going to try to set the price.
Right.
They're competitive. It's like the perfect example of a competitive market is 2 gas stations across the street. Mm-hmm. If one goes a cent lower, then the other one's got to go a cent lower because they're going to get most of the business. And so when you're in that competitive market where you can only hurt yourself by underselling, because you really want to have a good understanding of your cost structure. And that's why most agriculture production systems are very efficient, because the system pushes you to be be efficient. And so that's where the farmers are always trying to just find that margin and eke out that margin of profitability so they can remain profitable year after year. It's going to fluctuate because there's so many challenges. But if they can just eke out that margin that they can maintain and survive. Right. And that's why there's so much government support in agriculture. Because some people talk about, all the subsidies and the emergency payments. But in general, consumers benefit because we can always go to that grocery store and milk doesn't fluctuate in price drastically. Bread doesn't fluctuate in price drastically. It's fairly consistent. And that's because those systems to allow that product to come through the system and be there. It has been managed, and certain adjustments are there to make sure that there's not large supply shocks.
Right. Awesome. So I think another thing you mentioned, and something we've heard recurring in our interviews, is this talk of input costs with the conflict in Ukraine going on. When this thing started, I think a lot of us, I didn't expect for it to go on this long. You know what I mean? I'm kind of surprised that it's continuing, that both sides have continued as drastically as they have. So farmers here in Arkansas, I've heard from some of our farmers for the first time in years, they're going to use chicken litter to fertilize hay crops and all kinds of stuff. So what kinds of, do y'all have any solution? How do we deal with this?
So a lot of it is new frontiers for us in terms of trying to think through. There's a whole host of strategies that farmers use, but a lot more of them are coming to light when you get into these drastic times. And I guess that's one of the silver linings of the pandemic and the input crisis is that our farmers are very innovative. And so a lot of these things that they'll figure out on their own, the universities, they're trying to do some research on different things, on different options for fertilizer. Chicken litter has been around for a long time. And so the thing that they're doing is they're doing things with the composting of that litter to make it more safe to put on even some of the food crops and the appropriate time that you allow it to be in the field before you start planting and things of that nature. So we don't get into specifics of that at that level on the production side, more on the what does it cost in terms of trying to identify those sources and trying to help farmers understand what does that cost versus what your fertilizer costs. But then also getting some of the experts on the production side to make sure that they're using that, if they're using chicken litter, that they're using the appropriate levels and they're not over fertilizing, so that they can be efficient even in that new system that they use.
Right. Awesome. And then, finally, I think another thing you mentioned, and that actually pertains to this episode we're in right now. This is, we just got out of April, and of course, Arkansas, through the middle of April, saw those terrible thunderstorm systems roll through and tornado activity both in central Arkansas and northeast Arkansas. And so, we even kind of recall back, we've got some farmers that are raising cattle down in the bottoms, and we recall back to, they had to vacate their fields a few years ago for the Arkansas River flood. And so what kind of programs or opportunities has your organization seen in the face of weather?
So in the face of weather, there's crop insurance programs trying to get farmers aware. One, that they're signed up with Farm Service Agencies so that in the event when these disasters occur, that they are identified as a farmer so that they can be eligible. So sometimes farmers say, no, I don't want to be signed up, or I don't want to get registered in, so that the government knows what I'm doing. But at the time when those emergencies or those disasters occur, if you're not on the rolls, it's really hard for you to get in and get some of that much needed support, because some of those events can devastate a farm. So we're trying to talk about what are the USDA programs that are available through Farm Service Agency. What are some things that farmers can do to manage their natural resources on their land, to hopefully mitigate, if you have a place that floods frequently, is there some things that you can do through conservation and other things of that nature to help try to manage it in a way? If it is, a 100-year flood event is a 100-year flood event. That's something that's just catastrophic. But just trying to have an understanding of those programs, also the different crop insurance programs that are available for both too much rain and also for drought, so for too little rain. And then some of the protections that they have. So they even have a product that they call whole farm revenue, where you can insure for your revenue level, which is helping you with both not only the price that you're going to receive, but also the yield that you have off of your whether that's livestock or crop. So you can insure an income level. But again, that comes with an added cost. But just trying to help farmers understand and work through those. So what's the frequency or the probability that I'm going to have this event versus that cost? Right. Because you pay that cost with a certainty, but you may or may not have to inflict it. But I tell people that, I've heard the comment when it comes to insurance is that insurance doesn't pay. And I say, well, it really, you don't want to have that mindset, because I've got insurance on my car, but I'm not hoping to have an accident.
Right.
So you're just hoping to mitigate and manage that situation when there is an adverse event. And so having that mindset and explaining through that and helping farmers manage through that, it's tedious, because I think I've touched on all the other things that they're trying to manage.
Right. Absolutely.
And so the men and women that are farmers and ranchers, they do a phenomenal job, passionate, hardworking. But have a lot on their plate. And the one thing that we always say within our risk management programs is to have a team that's helping you. So they've got a mechanic or somebody that's helping them with repairs on their machinery. They've got somebody in the finance sector, whether that's with Ag Credit or with the local community bank, that's helping them to help finance their operation, to have maybe those lines of credit to help them take advantage of different things. And then they have the people that are helping them on the production side. What variety of products should I plant out here? Even if I'm growing corn, there's different types of corn you can plant, and those types of things. What types of systems do they want to use, and helping those farmers work through that. So comprehensively, that's what risk management is. It's kind of putting a framework to help a farmer identify some resources, identify some strategies, and what expertise would they need to try to bring in to try to rely on.
Right. So everything we've talked about, we've talked about costs and weather and input costs, and all of these are very concrete real world stressors, right? But our podcast and kind of the stories we see unfolding, we're also kind of trying to highlight that invisible stuff. And I think somebody like you, who's kind of, like we said, agriculture adjacent at least for 30 years, and something we've spoken about before is kind of this weight of legacy. You have a lot of farmers farming big farms, and their dads farmed that same land, and maybe their kids, and so. How do you see that kind of unfolding?
No, it's added stress. I think the CDC classifies agriculture or farming as one of the highest stress industries out there, and part of it is that weight of all these experts that a farmer has to be, but part of it is a weight that my family is depending on me, him or her. My family is depending on me to provide for my family, but then you might have some children that you're trying to say, well, we're trying to pass this farm on because it was passed on to me from my parents, who was passed on from their parents. So if you're talking about a fourth, fifth, or even a 10-generation legacy there, think about those long legacies of the generational, and that there may be a big family that's now it's 5 families that are farming. And all the intricacies of that. So if the business fails, it's 5 families that are going to have to go out and search for options. So that creates a different dynamic, and you see it play out. And at the end of the day, they're families. So you have all the struggles of family communication, and then you intertwine business communication into it. And it is done at different levels across various families, but you can see how that can easily add a lot of stressors. So there can be stressors in the family, in the household, that impact the business.
Absolutely.
And I never will forget this. A colleague, they were talking about in New York, and I think they had started bringing some counselors out to farm management. So the ag economist, he's there, he's looking at notes. He's like, oh, they got a cash flow problem. Oh, we really got to get a handle on their cash flow. He's driving back because the counselor was very quiet because it was the first meeting that she was attending, and he goes, what do you think? He said, what do you think about their business? He goes, oh, they got marriage problems. And she said, the marriage problems are creating the business problems because they weren't communicating and they were making business decisions independently, which is, that may not be best for the business, but also sometimes in detriment, because there was an argument in the family that was impacting the business. And so those family dynamics are important. So communication is important. And while we're getting into, that's a recent space that we've been getting into. Human risk is one of the areas that we look at. It's an area that I've become a deeper appreciation for the difficult nature of trying to manage that, because not stereotyping, but I'll stereotype. What makes a farmer is their independence, him or her. And sometimes you can't get an independent person to communicate. And so lots of times it's trying to talk about the importance of that communication, not just in the operation of the business, but in the transition of that business from generation to generation, because you also have those issues that occur. But when we look at risk management, we look across 5 broad areas: production, marketing, finance, legal, and then human, which gets into that communication, which gets into that stress, which gets into worker training, and just kind of family dynamics to a degree.
So y'all have got some great programs, some great insight on solving common farmer problems. Are there any types of farms that aren't eligible for you? You know what I mean? Can anybody call you? I mean, is there...
Any farm can call us, so anyone is eligible for our resources. Now, when we're giving out our grants, we will not give a grant to an individual farm. It's got to be a collection of farms, or a cooperative, or a farmer organization, or a farmer association. So we don't give funding for training to individual farms, but we collectively will fund different groups or organizations that train those farmers collectively.
And what's the website? How do we get in contact with you?
Yeah, so srmec.uada.edu. So that SRMEC is Southern Risk Management Education Center at University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture. So uada.edu.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and I think it was a wealth of information, and I think y'all are a great asset to have here in the center of the state to help farmers face some of these unprecedented struggles.
No, that's great. I appreciate the opportunity, and even though we're in the Little Rock office, our office is as close as our county extension office. They can access us through our county extension offices in every county of the state. So thank you for the opportunity, and I wish our farmers and ranchers well.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Visit arpbs.org for more stories and content like this from Arkansas PBS.